Hey everyone, welcome back to the Imperial Minis channel. This is Randall, and today we're going to talk about a new unit for the upcoming Brotherhood Without Banners faction. As of the recording of this episode, this unit was just revealed by CMON, and there is some exciting discussion to have related to this new unit. As some of you may already know, CMON has revealed that a new faction, the Brotherhood Without Banners, will be coming to the game in November. This game will include iconic characters such as Beric Dondarrion and Thoros of Myr, and feature their band of knights and small folk who are supposedly committed to the protection of the people of the Seven Kingdoms against the depredations of the Lannisters and other malevolent forces. We've seen a preview of the starter box contents, but so far we've only seen the unit card of the peasant unit. We believe the starter box will have two commanders, Beric Dondarrion being one of them, and we have seen his commander attachment and tactics cards, but haven't seen the other commander's tactics cards or the Brotherhood's base deck yet. The unit we'll be discussing today, the Brotherhood Sworn Knights, is a cavalry unit that will be coming out a month after the launch of the Brotherhood starter box. We can also reasonably expect a hero box to be launching either alongside the starter box or in December with the Sworn Knights. For the purposes of this video, however, let's stay focused on the Sworn Knights and proceed with the discussion. First, let's take a look at the unit card. The Sworn Knights have a movement speed of 5, which is what you'd expect for a medium to heavy cavalry unit. Their defensive stats are a solid 3+ armor, and then a just as solid 5+ morale. We'll do some comparisons with other cav units in the game in just a bit, but these are very solid defensive stats for a cav unit in this game. Taking a look at the Knight's melee stats, they hit on a 3+ and have 7 dice at full ranks and 5 at 1 rank. 7 on full ranks is average to high for non-lance cavalry, but the 5 on the 1 rank is actually a best-in-class number. Generally, cavalry throw 4 dice on 1 rank, not 5. Only very punchy but often squishy cavalry units hit with 5 dice on 1 rank, and this unit is punchy but not at all squishy. Taking a look at the Knight's abilities, they have the Knightly Armaments ability that grants the unit Sundering and gives them rerolls if the opponent does not control the crown. So, you don't have to control the crown yourself to get the rerolls. Your opponent just can't control the crown. So even if you were engaged with a unit and you're attacking off of the sword zone at the top of a round, you'd get the rerolls since the opponent doesn't control the crown. This Knightly Armaments ability, pairing Sundering with easily accessed rerolls, is among the best parts of this unit. The crown is typically the least desirable zone, so you don't often see it claimed until the end of the NCU dance. Finally, this unit has the Rally the Small Folk ability. As the name might suggest, this ability is another version of the Rally Cry ability, only this ability is conditional upon the knights destroying an enemy rank, and its healing ability is limited only to a friendly infantry unit. Rally the Small Folk ability is good to keep nearby peasants healthy, but you could even use it to heal, let's say, the Baratheon Rose Knights, who are definitely not small folk. Healing the Rose Knights will trigger Deadly Bloom, dealing a wound to the unit the Rose Knights are engaged with. Speaking of Rose Knights, if you'll forgive the quick tangent, these guys look like they would love to have Beric Dondarrion Commander attached to them, giving them Sentinel for added movement, Duty to the Crown for additional heals to trigger Deadly Bloom, and Pathfinder to allow them to move through any type of terrain. Alright, now back to the Sworn Knights. One very important consideration to keep in mind related to these easy rerolls the Knights have access to is the effect of terrain and disorderly charges. As long as your opponent does not control the crown, the Sworn Knights do not care about hindering terrain, and they're not as bothered about having a disorderly charge. This is really huge. These guys can charge through a bog or a corpse pile and still get their rerolls, so opponents will have to think twice about using terrain as a deterrent for a Sworn Knight charge. The last thing to discuss from the unit card is the piece of information we still can't see, the points cost. I think it's reasonable to assume that this is either a 7 or 8 point unit. Based on the quality of the unit's stats and abilities, it looks probably more like an 8-point unit than a 7-point unit, but I have been surprised before by unit costs. CMON generally errs on the side of making a unit too expensive rather than too cheap, but we have already seen how good the peasants look at 4 points. Now let's very quickly look at some comparisons among the factions we presume the Brotherhood will be able to draw combat units from. It's been announced that the Brotherhood will be able to pull 1 Stark or 1 Baratheon unit into their armies. We haven't heard if there are any points or specific unit name limitations to this, so for now we'll just assume the Brotherhood will have access to the entire Stark or Baratheon roster. Neutrals as well is something that, until proven otherwise, we'll just assume the Brotherhood has full access to. Starting with Stark, we have the Apex Predator Lance Cav unit, the Tully Cavaliers, at 8 points. These guys are equivalent defensively to the Sworn Knights. Their alpha damage on the charge is higher, but after the charge, the Sworn Knights definitely have better grinding potential. Then we have the House Umber Ravagers at 7 points. Defensively, the Sworn Knights have equivalent morale, but much heavier armor. The Ravagers move faster and also hit very hard, but only once they only really reach their full potential at 1 rank, or when benefiting from some of the Stark abilities to hit at their highest attack die value. Turning to Baratheon, at 8 points there are the Champions of the Stag. The champs exist primarily to grind down their opponents, but they are slow, and they have average morale, which is their Achilles heel. Offensively, the champs' dice values are both worse than the Sworn Knights, and their grinding potential is probably a little worse. Turning to a couple of 6-point Baratheon options, we have the Riders of Highgarden and the Crownland Scouts. The Riders have the Alpha Strike advantage over the Sworn Knights with their Lance Cav charge, but then they utterly melt in a protracted melee due to their poor armor. The Crownland Scouts are shown here primarily to demonstrate their utility in conjunction with the Sworn Knights, using tactical reposition to move the Sworn Knights, and mark target to soften up the target in anticipation of a charge by the Sworn Knights. The fact that the Brotherhood can bring 1 Stark or Baratheon unit opens up a ton of list building potential. Finally, let's look at the 7 to 8 point neutral options. At 8 points, there's the Flayed Men. The Flayed Men have equivalent movement and armor, but inferior morale. The Flayed Men's dice pool is also worse than the Sworn Knights, and they're less effective after they've charged. The Hedge Knights are a 7-point unit with inferior defense and morale, but they have a 7 dice top end and sundering like the Sworn Knights. The Hedge Knights need to benefit from control of the swords or bag, though, in order to amplify their offensive or defensive abilities, respectively. All these comparisons of other cav units that the Brotherhood have access to leads me to conclude that, on paper at least, and without full knowledge of the Brotherhood tactics deck, these Sworn Knights look pretty amazing, even at 8 points. I'd wager that some solid double Sworn Knight lists will be produced once the unit is released. Due to having access to so many other out-of-faction cavalry units as well, I could see some very cav-centric Brotherhood lists in the future, although you'll want some infantry units like peasants around to benefit from the Rally the Small Folk ability. Now, before closing out the video, let's take a look at how you can make the absolute most out of this unit, given the information we have about them and the faction so far. The first thing that jumped out to me was what a perfect home these Sworn Knights would be for a Fortune Seeker attachment. The Sworn Knights want to attack and attack and attack, since they're usually going to have rerolls on their Sundering attack. Fortune Seeker lets them be almost guaranteed to get 2 attacks off per round. Having Dauntless with their 5+ morale is also a good source of trickle healing. Next, there's the obvious Peasant synergy. Peasants have gang up, so if the Sworn Knights pile into a Peasant melee, they'll be charging with 8 dice with Sundering and rerolls. And then the next time they attack after engage, they'll also be attacking with 8 dice and Sundering and rerolls. Not many units can stand up to repeated punches of 8 dice with Sundering and rerolls. The Sworn Knights' Rally the Small Folk ability also benefits the peasants, as they're likely to take high casualties from combat, but whose continued existence will keep the Knights swinging harder. Now let's look at the Sworn Knights synergy with the only Brotherhood commander we have full knowledge of so far, Beric Dondarrion. Beric Dondarrion comes with Assault Orders in his deck, which we all know can wreak some serious havoc in aggressive lists. There's the possibility under Beric to allow the Sworn Knights to attack 4 times in 1 round. Now let's say you bring along Peter Baelish, as you might want to do, to control the crown. Peter could, at the top of the round, claim the crown, but benefit from the sword zone to get a free attack for the Sworn Knights. Your opponent would then likely follow up with either taking the swords or the bag with their NCU. If they took the bag, then you just take the swords again. If they took the swords, now you just use your Fortune Seeker to claim the bag and with another NCU and trigger another free attack with the Sworn Knights. Now, depending on whether you killed that unit or not, you could sequence your next 2 actions appropriately. If the unit died, you could activate the Knights next and then charge them into something else. And then you could play your final NCU to trigger Assault Orders and get another free attack in with the Sworn Knights with Sundering and 8 dice, potentially, and rerolls. An important side effect to consider of all of these attacks is the Rally the Small Folk ability. After 4 attacks, that ability would have healed a total of 8 wounds to your infantry units. Now let's really quickly look at Beric's other tactics cards and see how they benefit the Sworn Knights. First up, there's Lightbringer. The Knights could use this card potentially to one-shot a unit after charging in. This requires that the enemy fail most of their armor saves and badly fail both panic tests, but it's possible, especially if the unit wasn't completely healthy to begin with. Finally, there's the 6 times too many card. This card can be dropped on a unit of peasants to keep them alive long enough for the Sworn Knights to make use of their gang up ability to deliver a huge hit to the enemy. And who really cares about the downside of this card when it's used on peasants? So that does it for this rapid fire preview of the Brotherhood Sworn Knights. The Brotherhood Without Banners faction is set to launch in November of 2024, with these knights following on in December. Thanks for tuning into this video, and if you enjoyed it, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe to the channel for more A Song of Ice and Fire content. I'd also love to hear other folks' impressions of this unit. Do you agree that they look very powerful, even if they're 8 points? Or do you think they're less impressive than I let on? I'd like to know what you think. Until next time, this is Randall, signing off.